cultural value. Rather than replacing one another, these traditions layered, intersected, and evolved, creating the remarkable artistic continuum that remains vibrant and alive today. Which brings us to our conversation this morning. Art of the West in 2026, shared history and separate mythology. So, without further ado, let me introduce our esteemed panel and moderator. Ryan Suazo, artist. Carla Bogdanoff, artist. Susan Folwell, artist. And full disclosure, my way. Arthur López, artist. Mr. Jim Vogel, artist. Ezra Tucker, artist. And Mr. Michael Grauer, who's going to keep all of these folks in check. And then you also already know Mr. Michael Clawson, editor of Western Art Magazine and Big Art Magazine. So thank you. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Thank you, Davison. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you to the Couse-Sharp Site, the London Research Center, all of the great institutions that are here and supporting the show. Thank you for being here. And thank you to our panelists today. We're going to have a really vibrant conversation. Because we do have 8 people on the panel, not every person is going to get to answer the questions, but I think the ones that hear something that they want to reply to are certainly going to hop in, because we do have a lot of ground to cover here today. We have a lot of really exciting topics to talk about. Let's start with the title of today's show. The title includes the phrase shared and separate mythologies. As we explore some of these themes, what roles do you think art has in uniting history and mythology? And again, whoever would like to respond first, just chime in.
Wait, I didn't know we were on yet.
I can't. The title of the theme of our panel today is Shared Histories and Separate Mythologies. As we explore some of these themes, what roles do you think art has in uniting history and mythology? And Susan, I think you were leaning forward there.
No, I was going to put Michael Grauer on the spot.
We had a warm-up practice session on Zoom a couple of weeks ago, and volunteered me to throw the first chair. So I'm not sure what that really means, but some of you may know me, and I'm a pretty straight shooter on things. So I'd like to start this way. If you're a veteran, raise your hand, please. Let's recognize them. And part of that shared history can be painful, some of it's glorious, and we remember we all share that. And I think back to my own ancestors who were part of the Revolutionary War, Arthur Tucker, and David Dew, you were at Range Line and Valley Forge. And coming forward in time, people like Casimiro Romero from Morro Valley, who enlisted in the Union Army to fight the Civil War. For example, 4 regiments of African American soldiers by Act of Congress in 1866, coming forward to the first code talkers who were not in World War II, they were Chickasaw in World War I, and then of course the code talkers we know well from the Navajo culture in World War II, and then coming forward. I think we're going to remember, we're assembling here today, we're able to assemble here today because of their sacrifice, so thank you veterans for your sacrifice. You really did. For me to somewhat answer the question. There is shared history, of course. We're all part of that great textile, that great quilt. Everyone has a thread in that great quilt, that great weaving. That's the U.S. and also North America and then ultimately the world. And you artists are all part of not only southwestern United States, New Mexico, but also American art and ultimately world art. All of us have our own mythology. I have my personal mythology. Each one of you has your own personal mythology. Oh, and then eventually you have a family mythology, and then your particular bigger family, cultural, whatever that is. And we talked about this the other day, is we need to remember it is personal. And so when an artist picks up a brush, and just so y'all know, they're all artists. I make my living off the work that they do, because I'm a historian. I do have a painting degree, but I learned very quickly. I don't have the thing that drives me to create that these artists here have, but I do have a drive to learn something, and hopefully try to act as an interpreter. I'm simply a conduit to the fabulous work that artists like these do. But they have their own mythology that comes to their canvas, their loom, their wheel, whatever it is, that informs the art that they create. And so we need to remember, right or wrong doesn't have any role in that, but it's all part of the collective. And ultimately, it comes together. Sometimes the threads are broken, sometimes they're healed and put back together. And I think we need to remember that it is a whole. So that's what I'll say.
Yeah, and to answer, going back to some of that question for me, my name is Arthur López. I'm honored to be working in a 400-year-old tradition that is known as the Santeros tradition that started 400 years ago. And I'm honored to be continuing that tradition, but in a whole different way, whereas 400 years ago, up until the early 1900s, the type of work that I do is created specifically devotional purposes, whereas now it's transcended into an art form, and it's finally getting 400-year recognition as an actual art form rather than specifically devotional. So that thread for what I do is taken, that long just to be recognized by as an actual art form. And while what I do is honoring that tradition and keeping some of those traditional ways, it's done. The final product is done in a contemporary way, but done in traditional methods and materials. So that's kind of how I see that as that thread that's continued through in my view.
History and mythology, do you see them as united or do you see them as separate?
I think personally it's becoming more united. It's been, before there were so many different genres of art, and everything's put into these classifications that now people are recognizing that it's like country music when we look at the old style versus what's happening now, pop country. You're having these threads that are combining with each other to make one fabric and these sounds.
Or are you just diluting the threads where you can't even tell what fabric is polyester? Is it good to just mishmash things? And I'm not saying that like you're advocating, but I do see, like, to the original question of history versus mythology. Well, a lot of stuff we were taught as history when we were kids and we believe what our teacher handed us from the textbook as fact, which is kind of what we want history to be. It's factual. It's based on historians and research, or is it just straight up jingoism that we've been taught? And then what I've learned is or not what I've learned, but this is what I believe, is that mythology is more important than history. Because mythology is taking that human filter and acknowledging that's what we're doing. I will use a word that might offend some people, but this is what I describe what I do every day. I make shit up every day. I just sit there and these stories come into my head and I'm fabricating these things. But in a mythology, it's because that story has been filtered through a person or a culture. Whereas in history, it has this idea, we've been taught this concept that history is this distilled fact-based representation of what happened in the past. Not necessarily. But mythology, we go, well, we're going to give them some room because because mythology has a little bit of magic, it's got a little bit of interpretation, and sometimes it resonates better with history.
You were talking about sort of history and how it's a little fuzzy. I mean, what's the saying? History is written by the victors.
Right.
So what is even history to a certain degree, right? Arthur, you were talking about classifications, and I think this is a good point to ask this question. Do you see yourselves as American artists, or do you see yourselves as the different Western artists, Native American artists, Weaver? How do you like to perceive this work? Is it all American art, or do you, for the Native American artists, is there still a lot of pride in being a Native American artist?
For sure, yeah, there is that. I guess I would consider my work to be native art. I don't know that I have ever thought of it as Western art, what I do. But just related to that last question, I think one of the things that Western art does is, I think it provides kind of a more palatable way for people to think about like the Western expansion of the country. It's just an easier way to maybe have a sense of the history, rather than a factual understanding where maybe you're confronting some of the less comfortable things. So maybe art, in some way, it kind of makes it an easier thing to think about.
Anyone else feel strongly about that, or maybe Ezra? I want to ask you, and Susan, I saw you moving quickly like there. I don't want to neglect you. Do you see yourself as a Western painter, or are you an American artist?
I'm an American artist that happens to be doing right now imagery of the West, what we call the West. And my education, I went to art school, and the way that as a kid, I wanted to be an artist. I have an idea of any type of genre or area that I wanted to focus on, other than just doing pictures of animals. That was how I grew up, just sitting down and drawing animals. And when I realized that there was a genre called wildlife art, I was like, cool, I can do that. And then as I got older and I went to college, I realized there were all kinds of areas in our culture that needed imagery done for marketing and so on. And I have a degree in advertising design, and I was happy to be doing that type of image of product illustration, the whole range of typography, on and on and on. I just enjoyed creating, and it said to me in college is that the thing that defines our culture is the arts. And when we look at ancient cultures, and the archaeologists dig up all of these temples and statues and all of that, that's the art that was created that defines that culture. And I said, okay, I have a fascination with architecture, I have a fascination with the natural world, I have a fascination with, just the whole range of existing. And me wanting to just create opened up my world that our culture is very dependent on our architecture. Everything we touch and see every day, there's an artist's hand to touch it. And I'm part of it, and I'm happy to be part of that. I still do it every day. I don't concentrate in one area. As I'm involved in the portrait chair. I'm doing landscapes. I'm doing topography and some of the paintings.
One of the paintings I know is in the slideshow, where it's a Buffalo Bill painting of this Buffalo Bill wagon, and a hand lettered over that. You know, that's, and I know there are people that strictly do that. I know there are people that strictly do portraiture, that do landscapes. I'm doing it all. So when I look at my work, I say I'm American because I'm reflecting the culture that I was born into, and every day I'm using the skills that I've learned that is useful and I think helpful to our culture.
And no hesitation at all. I asked and you knew. Susan, I think I may have interrupted you. Go ahead. What, did you want to say something about that?
I forgot. But with that said, and going back to Ryan and Ezra, I mean, I think in some way we all have a shared experience as artists in a certain way. And in particularly growing up in the Southwest, growing up in the Vogel, there are certain values and things in life, as we all have, that we've been taught. It's part of our personal story. It's all part of our personal mythology. But particularly growing up on the reservation, you are taught very strict ideas, and even in art, you shouldn't really veer from those thoughts. And it hasn't been that long, really, it's our generation now that has, I think, has just started to move into, okay, I have this history of being Native American, Northern New Mexican. I live in the Southwest. And I'm not sure it even matters that if you say I'm an American artist or a Southwestern artist, because you're influenced by all of it. Everyday events, what's going on in our country, what's going on in the world. But what does help influence that, at least I think for me, is that it's all of that, what I grew up with, what I learned growing up. That then comes out in the art, right? So we all make our own mythology in that way, and from a personal influence, it's either being from the Southwest or just being American.
Can I jump in here?
Oh, please, yeah, please.
So about 10 years ago, the Harvard Foundation had a symposium asking the question, is Couse-Sharp American or Western? And I happened to be one of the speakers, along with Dean Porter, who's now deceased, one of the great scholars on Couse-Sharp, and Lindy Besaw, who's now the director of the Art Museum at the University of Indiana. And I was angry when I got there about the question, and wore my cowboy hat on purpose, so ladies would have the house, but it's partly a point, as is my hand-painted cowgirl tie, just to make a point. But art history realm is full of snobs, okay? There are accepted art forms and accepted areas of studies. And until about 50 years ago, I would say American art was beyond the pale. It was merely a pale imitation of other far greater traditions in Europe and Asia, where take your pick. And so American art was, you know, if you want to study that, it's not really legitimate, but go ahead and patch on the head and do that. And then you go a little bit farther to the west, you get into Western art. Western art, I mean, that's just a bunch of cowboys and Indians, you know, that's not even legitimate. That's not even real art anyway. And then likewise, native art forms were curios. They were not really art objects, they were curios, collectibles and so on. And so when I finally got to teach art history, I would talk to my students about when that migration took place between the Navajo saddle blanket on the floor, and suddenly it was something that hung on the wall. And it went from being a collectible to a fine art object once it's on the wall, or in a glass case, or on a pedestal. When did that take place and why? It's because we broadened our perspective. Hopefully we showed some of the snobs the door, but at the same time, that snobbery still exists even amongst artists. I mean, Marston Hartley came here and said, Towson Santa Fe is just full of a bunch of cheap illustrators. Well, I'll tell you what, there's nobody slops paint harder than an illustrator because they have a whole different kind of mechanism to create art. To me, slop and paint, slop and paint. And that's a euphemism for any art making now. Don't be offensive. And so it's simply a matter of patronage, who's going to pay it, right? But these people make art because they have to, because they're called to do that. And to categorize, that comes from a whole other realm. But please remember, artists our history gets in the way of art far more frequently than it helps art and helps to study. There you go.
This is why you're on the panel.
There's the first chair.
We're talking about who gets to make art in the West and who doesn't make art, and the images that they're depicting, or the subjects that they're depicting. What is the responsibility of the artist, if any, to tell a larger, more inclusive story about the West?
I think it's a very touchy subject. I think, it's like they say, an Indian can be a cowboy, but a cowboy can't be an Indian. And when you're painting outside of your culture, it can be very touchy to someone else or to that culture if it's done in a feeling that's disrespectful to that culture. So you're doing this really fine line where, you know, with the Hispanic community and the Native American community in New Mexico, convergence, you know, happened, you know, 100 years ago, and a lot of that started to blend and be acceptable. So a lot of what you're seeing, whether it was jewelry making that was taught by the Spanish, or weaving the churro sheep that were brought in, or vice versa with pottery or other types of genres. So I think as an artist, you have to be very careful as to what you are depicting outside of your culture, in my personal opinion, without being offensive to that culture.
Anyone else? Ezra, go ahead.
My point of view is, I'm an illustrator. That's my degree. I'm an artist that has to do an illustration. And the challenge that I've had throughout my career is to be as accurate as possible. To do research. Don't be afraid to do research, no matter what you're doing. And do it to the understanding. If you do the research and get it accurate, you're not going to offend people, hopefully. But there's always, you know, somebody's going to be offended, no matter what. And I remember Convenience saying, you can't tell a joke that's not going to offend somebody in front. You know, and I know that I'm not capable of knowing everything and making mistakes. But the challenge that I've had, whether I was doing product illustration for Anheuser-Busch, I did painting for the Clydesdales for their advertising. I love painting horses. I love draft horses. So I have a memory and a research library of draft horses. So whenever Anheuser-Busch called me to do a painting of the Clydesdales, they were very pleased. You know, that's their corporate identity. I took the time, took the effort to do the research in order to get the confirmation, the color, the harnesses, all of those things that was important to the corporation to get it right. And I did a lot of their advertising for a good 12 years, mainly because I focused on not wanting to offend my client and also to continue to perpetuate what their work identity is. And I choose to do that whenever I pick up a paintbrush, pencil, and create any work of art that I do. I'm wanting to be as accurate as I possibly can to get to solve my end goal of getting a essence of whatever I'm doing without being I'm not a photographic artist. I can do photorealism, I choose not to. I want to just imply or get a feeling across. And that way, I think I solve, I educate, I inspire, and that's my goal whenever I do this.
Jim, I want to ask a version of this question to you, because you're very much a storyteller. the images that you're painting they have all these great history and just things that you've researched or stories that you've looked into. That seems like that's an important part of your studio, is to go out and find stories that maybe haven't been told.
Yeah, that's true. I come from a storytelling family. For those of you that haven't read the bio, the 11th of 12, there was a lot of talking in that household. My mom was a storyteller. My grandfather, my New Mexican grandfather, who grew up close to these amazing storytellers. So like, what I did was channel my artistic ability to tell stories. And the stories I want to tell are the ones that I feel personally bonded to, which is New Mexican. And it goes back to your question about being an American artist, or I don't identify, like I rarely think of myself as an American or Western, but I'm New Mexican, I'm Nuevo Mexicano. And sometimes I say I'm a jealous son of New Mexico, because I feel like sometimes people don't have a right to claim her because they're not treating her like they should. And that gets to the question of like, who has the right to paint what? And I don't have a right to tell anyone else what they should or shouldn't paint, but I should think about it sometimes myself. And it gets to a bigger question, like our daughter Michaela is 27 now. Wonderful person, has a different way of seeing things. As much as I try to keep that from happening. And we had this discussion once, and I don't even remember what the image was, but I was working on, I was jazz, and she's like, well, what gives you the right to do that thing in jazz versus something else? And I'm like, well, because it came into my head. And then it put me into this process of thinking, what do I have the right to represent, does it have to be wholly personal for it to be legitimate? It has to only be from my origin, my stories. Then I started thinking, well, do I even have a right to paint other people? Do I have the right, for instance, women have been used as models by painters forever, mostly male painters. Do men have a right to paint women? Do I have a right to paint anyone but myself? So then along that line, I can only do self-portraits. So, but in that process, I didn't realize that even if I'm painting, another gender, another race, another part of the world, the end result is it's always a self-portrait. So that I can see you on.
I like that perspective. We're talking a lot about paintings, and I feel like we need to talk to Carla a little bit. Before we started the panel today, her and I were talking about weaving. And even though you're not painting subjects in the same way that Jim and Ezra are, there's a lot of history that comes with weavings and where those designs come from. And talk to us a little bit about that. And you're working with a lot of history behind you on your designs. Those come from someplace.
Yeah. For those of you who may not be familiar, I do historic weaving, weaving primarily Rio Grande blankets. And in our gallery downtown Couse, I have a lot of source material with the historic blankets that we have in the gallery. So I have the opportunity to really examine and spend time with antique textiles and learn what they have in terms of materials and design, and incorporate that into my weaving. So the reference that I have is direct. And I think I'm lucky as far as weavers go. A lot of weavers don't have the opportunity to be exposed to that kind of history. So I feel very fortunate for it. I see the historic weaving that I do, for the most part, I don't really actually even consider myself an artist. I consider myself a weaver first and foremost. And for me, the process of weaving is the journey of creating that weaving. And the end result of an object is the object of my work, the weaving itself, is carries the direct information. It's not a representation as like a painting is, but the weaving itself is a direct link to history, and it's the direct link to the object in the past. So a lot of my weavings do get picked up by painters. There's been a number of painters that have included weavings that I've woven in their paintings, which I always enjoy seeing and I'm proud of. Otherwise, I have them in the gallery. Half the gallery downtown is a weaving studio, and I have them available for sale there as well. So.
Thank you, Carla. I'm curious to know what the role of humor is, or even satire in art. And I think if everyone could just take a moment and look around the room that we're in, I mean, this is a really great example of an artist that is using humor and satire to tell a larger story. So for the artists on the panel, what role does humor play for you? Is this something that you think about with your own work and telling more complex stories?
Okay. Yes, and talking about offending people or not offending people, I think humor plays a huge part in that, because you can talk about a lot of difficult subjects that can be hard to broach with the public. That includes another race, that includes another person, that includes politics, gun control, sexual violence, 9/11. So, and we still haven't found a better word than the word humor. When there's a certain amount of levity to it, I find that people, they can approach you from a different concept, from a different idea that they have in their head. I did a piece, I've done a number of pieces on gun control in America. And I was doing another one, and I was like, is this, how many have I done? I've done at least a half dozen. Gun control is always relevant until we can control it. But it just felt like I was doing another one. And then unfortunately, Sandy Hook had happened right when I was working on this piece. So having that had happened, that piece was finished within a matter of days because of, just hearing the story, in living history, another story again, and your own emotions and hearing other people's stories about it. So I took the piece to the Heard Museum show, and a woman approached me. It was her neighbor's son that had been killed at Sandy Hook. And we were able to have a dialogue about it because of the nature of my perspective and the humor and the levity that I brought to it. So it was a school teacher, it was a large piece, so very pop art in nature. And a woman there's two women on both sides, and they're school teachers, and they're thinking about what they need to carry in their handbags now that they're teachers, what happens today at schools. Lipstick, pencil, paper, a gun, right, mace, just dangerous items just to keep their children safe because of, what's happening. And at the time, Ted Nugent, well, he's still a very vocal person about guns, gun control, our president. So part of that, she's thinking about what's dropping out of her purse. So it's very, if you've seen the movie, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Things are just at the very end of the movie, things are just sort of spinning in the water, and all of these, the pomade, the hound dog, right? So you get to see the entire story at the end of the movie. So that's kind of what the pop was like, and so that included a cassette tape of Ted Nugent and his support of guns. So back to the lady who came to the booth, and the second someone tells you they know about Sandy Hook, or they know someone that, any type of school shooting, you get braced for a minute, because you really don't know what's gonna happen or how they're going to react to what you've just done. And we had a really phenomenal dialogue about what's happening in America, what the family's going through, and I think it just really helped do that through humor.
I agree with Susan. I think I do a lot of that also with my work. I've done a lot of political pieces in my work, which are not so much difficult for me to do. It might be difficult for someone else to see, but it's very important, I think, as an individual, as an artist, because it helps to get what you're feeling out and express it into the world. And within that same realm, it's therapeutic in a sense, because you're in that studio, you're able to get it out. You're not on the street protesting, but you're protesting in your own artistic kind of way where you're allowing that freedom to escape you. And when you're doing it in a truthful way, truthful to yourself, truthful to what is happening, I think it's hard for people to argue with. I mean, unless they're on that other side of the fence, of course, but when you're skewing facts within your art, that's hard to have someone, disagree with. The satirical part, I think, again, it's like political cartoons. I tell people I'm just creating a story, I'm not, I'm telling the story, I'm not creating it. And it helps with the humor because it makes people laugh about it and look at themselves and see what's really happening. And I think it really just helps to put that idea of what is happening in the world in a lighter, in a sense, it helps people breathe a little bit better. And especially for the artists themselves. I think like with Susan's, if you see something or with anything I've done in satirical way, you can actually kind of just smile.
So I was curator of cowboy collections in Western art at the National Cowboy Museum in Oklahoma City for a while. And it has a certain mythology, let's say. And as art curator, you're supposed to help build a permanent collection. And there were two objects that I was principally involved in adding to that permanent collection. And remember, this is the place that has the Rodeo Historical Society. It was founded as a National Cowboy Hall of Fame, and so on and so forth. So one of the objects was by Luz de Taos, who's a great sculptor down in Santa Fe, from the Sontero tradition, very much so. But it was an object called La Princesa del Rodeo. And it was a woman on horseback depicting a rodeo queen, but she was a pull toy. She came on wheels on a platform. And I thought that was pretty funny. Not sure everybody in rodeo thought that was pretty funny, but at the same time, we put it in a contemporary gallery. And then, roughly about the same time, a Wyoming artist named Floyd Shaman, who got transplanted from doing carved sculpture in Wyoming to carving stone in Mississippi, where he taught for many years, he created an Annie Oakley figure, nearly life-size. And this is a place that has the Annie Oakley Society as part of its makeup. So Annie Oakley is fairly sacred there as well, but she rides a hobby horse in this sculpture that's about 5 feet tall. Needless to say, some of my choices were questioned, but I thought it was hilarious. Because I think, as Sue said, as Arturo said, it's important to add levity on some serious topics, but at the same time, Annie Oakley, for example, was a performer. She was from Ohio, and yet she's a little sharpshooter for Buffalo Bill's Wild West, his version of the Wild West. And so she eventually became another form of pop culture in the music. Doris Day plays her, multiple people play her. So is this depiction by Floyd Shaman the historical figure or the pop culture figure that appeared in the musical? Likewise, La Princesa del Rodeo. Rodeo has become a performance. It's not, it's so far beyond what original rodeo in Mexico in 1537, as it was originally founded, was a celebration at the end of the roundup. Just a reminder, rodeo means roundup. For 300 years before there's ever rodeo in the United States, and yet you now have La Princesa del Rodeo, which is a fixture in American rodeo today. So I think these are storytelling avenues, vehicles, because these people are conduits. Their calling comes, and their personal interpretation comes through in the art objects that they create. All of them are storytellers. Even if it's non-figurative, it's still storytelling in some way or another. And I think humor is absolutely vital, because like art historians, it's full of oh so serious people. There are plenty of artists who don't want you to make any sort of humor involved with the work that they do, and I get that, that's okay. You want to do that, go ahead, but I still think there's plenty of room for humor.
When we were initially meeting, we all of us met online to discuss this. One of the topics that came up and I thought was really interesting, and this is probably the topic that we're going to kind of end on, is the romanticization of the West. Some may argue that this isn't inherently bad, while others will say that it entraps us within stereotypes and cliches. So how can romanticism serve Western art, or is it best avoided? And how would you respond to the romantic sort of notions of the West within your own studios?
I think that romanticizing things, I think it might just be like a natural tendency for a lot of artists. Maybe it's for lack of going and doing your homework, your research. But I think artists in cultures like throughout history, I think there's always an element of that. And maybe it's even just coming from a place of cultural pride. You want to portray your people, your clan, your whatever in a positive light. You almost want to, you want to make them seem maybe noble or, something related to that. So I think that it's kind of like a human tendency to do that, and you might almost need to, for some people, maybe you almost have to pry yourself away from that tendency. Like you almost would have to make it a priority that like, I want to portray something in a factual way in order to not fall into the romanticizing.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I agree with what he's saying, and I would take it a step further about the romanticizing. Particularly in today's Western or market, I want to talk about it that way, it's a fine line of like saying, wow, that this person is romanticizing this genre, or are they perpetuating cliches and misconceptions about a particular era. And I think the idea of research is important, because if your research as an artist of someone else's art, then you're just repeating a cliche or worst case, just copying. But I think romanticism is a dangerous path. And that's when we lose sight of maybe the damage that's been done or the harm to other people, because we want to honor, our particular view, where what we've been taught is the right view of this situation, but maybe that's just a misrepresentation. And when a whole genre of artists perpetuate cliches or tropes, then after a while, it's like artists and collectors don't even recognize that it's a trope. So we need to question it when we approach it with romanticism. I am a romantic, but is this right?
And it feels like when you show certain periods of American history as this glorious, wonderful, beautiful time, it is erasing other cultures' pain, suffering that they were going through, it does feel, I can see certainly both sides. This is what we deal with the magazine all the time, is either an artist is going too far or they're not going far enough. Susan, I don't want to cut you off.
You know, I also think that as much as, and I agree with what Ryan says, that you have to do research. As an artist, I mean, you do have to be vigilant about what it is you want to say, but I also think that falls on the patron to have knowledge and to understand what you're looking at. And when that's all you want is romanticized art of Native America, that's not being educated, that's not advancing, that's not really looking. I mean, there's art for everybody, but it's not being symbiotic.
Not monopolize. But I like what you said, and also, there's this point as an artist where are we thinking, I'm gonna do this again because it's sold. And our family makes a living off of what we create, so we have to at least consider that somewhat. What is the market value of this? And then are we paying to the market? Or is it your job as an artist to say, I'm gonna do this, and then the collectors will come to realize that this is a more valuable collection, rather than just churning out another polygon in front of the W wall. So yeah, is it the market driving the artist, or should the artist drive the market, and the collectors go, man, I've seen that art for López stuff, but it's hard to fathom sometimes, and then at a certain point, you're like, oh, I get it, and then they love art for López.
I think a lot of that is true. You know, as an artist, I'm also, you know, my wife also collects art from other artists, so I wear kind of two hats as a collector and as an artist. And I think, you know, on my collector side, one of the worst things that I can see in another collector's house isn't that they collect the same artist, it's that they collect the same exact piece by that artist that you own, because then it takes that special piece. So it takes me back to when I create something, I make sure that each piece is a one of a kind. I don't do another piece, and if I'm commissioned to do that piece again, I let the collector know, or the client know, that I will not do the same piece of me, you know, maybe the same thing, but we're gonna do it in a different way, because this piece has to be unique to that person. Going back, I guess, to, you know, whether I feel my art is into that Western genre, I think because of kind of sense of place and where I live and where I grew up here in the Southwest, I think it definitely is part of that conversation, but it's taken a long time to actually be appreciated as artwork and not seen just as this religious object. So a lot of times it was difficult for me to explain what I do without going back to either having a sense of humor or doing those things for people to say, aha, this isn't actually a spiritual item. I mean, the thing is, with the same collectors or people that say, I can't buy that because I'm Jewish, they're collecting Puccinos. And you know, it's the same thing that you're looking at. And I think that the disassociation there is they're looking at, you know, an Al Pacino or something like that, so they don't see the actual figure. Whereas with what I do, whether it's a religious item, you know, when they start learning as a patron, it's just like, oh, I'm a dentist, can you make the same dentist? Okay, yeah, we can go, oh, now it makes sense to me, I can enjoy that. But for sense of place and where my artwork fits, I think, when I'm in my studio, I don't think about that. I don't think about being something, I don't think about this. That's kind of the classification that I think people need so that they know what kind of art we do. Whereas I feel it's just artwork in general, and it fits in the broader range of the conversation, as well as broader than the Southwest, into American art, into New York, into the East Coast, West Coast. I mean, personally, you know, I've shown in Europe and in Japan and other places, and it fits, because good art, when you look at our collections, good art goes well with art. We have anywhere from American art, Native American, Hispanic, Mexican, and good art just works and jumps all together.
One of our panelists said just learning about the artist. It's the collector's responsibility to kind of come to this whole thing with an openness in their heart, to ask questions, to learn about the history. We're going to have that opportunity tonight And we also have that opportunity right now. We're gonna open it up now to about 15 minutes of questions. Would anyone like to ask a question of our panel? Looks like we got someone back there.
Laura, curator at the George.
Hello, thank you everybody for being here, for your input. I have a question. I've been noticing the images scrolling on the screen behind you as you're speaking, which includes a lot of your artwork, but also several kind of distinct historical examples. And I'm wondering what led you to choose those historical examples to blend into examples of your of the work here?
Don't look at me, I didn't. Actually, many of the historic objects came from our initial discussion by Zoom. For example, the Remington Stampede painting, we were talking about the trope that all cowboys were white. And this particular painting can be interpreted, obviously it's cowboy color, we're just not sure exactly what culture, for example. And I grew up into the trail there because I walked by that and studied that sculpture for 6 years at the National Cavalry Museum. It stands right at the entrance. It's 16 feet tall. James Earl Fraser, who sculpted it for the Panama Pacific Exposition in 1915, had a particular point of view when he was trying to depict. I threw it up here in comparison to Frederick Remington's De Norther, particularly in pose as to what's going on. I personally don't see it. I see it as not the end of the trail. That's the way I see it. Fraser did not copyright the image. That's why you can see it on virtually anything. And I know that it can be a painful reminder in many respects, but at the same time, at that time in 1915, there was a great belief that Native culture was going away, literally had been pushed into the Pacific. I don't see it that way. I see this as a pause to the next level of perseverance and fight, frankly. That's the way I see it. Much like the cowpuncher in the Northern, you weather the storm and then you go on. So I don't see it as any sort of, that's me. I can only see it the way I see it. But it's an incredible work of art to see in person. You can see it on a necktie or a coffee mug or wherever else you've seen it, but until you stand in front of it, it does something very different. And also because I was fortunate enough to be around all the Bobcats and the Bozettos and other things that were part of that process. And he had great respect for Native American culture, but he was of a particular time. And I think that's what we need to remember is people are of their time. When we know better, we do better. And that's the key. When we know better, we do better. And we can stay in the place of problem or we can get to solution. And these artists here are all part of the solution. How do we get better? We tell better stories. We tell all the stories. As Ezra and I were talking earlier. You tell the truth, it's a better story anyway. I mean, the stew's far better with more ingredients, isn't it? So put all the ingredients in there. And they're all storytellers. It's just their particular vehicle is different. So the historic pieces are up there. And I also put up a woman sculptor who did Bronco Busters. Wait, how can that possibly? How can they know anything about that? Because the best Bronco Busters in early rodeo were all women. And that's why they were driven out of rodeo by Gene Autry, because they were far more popular than the men. That's you can look that up. That's a true story. So when you get down to the truth, tell the truth. Speak the truth.
I've got one. As a fellow artist, I think that we all think ahead. And is each one of you, I'm going to ask the question, is there a story that is in the back of your mind that someday you want to accomplish? And what is that?
For me, I do have many. A lot of them are based on just stories I've heard of our people from the Pueblo, like finding themselves in these situations, these strange scenarios. Like there's a story my dad told me of an uncle of mine couple other relatives, they were hitchhiking out to LA during maybe like the early 60s or something, because at that time, you know, work was pretty scarce around here. And so they were somewhere west of Albuquerque. Their car breaks down. At that time, people had this habit of like, you know, taking jalopy, unreliable cars that you would not, you know, like dare take out of town today, but they would do that. And so somewhere west of Albuquerque, this vehicle full of Indian guys going to LA breaks down. My uncle happened to have a cousin living in Albuquerque at the time. So he said, well, I'll hitchhike back to Albuquerque. Who pulls up but a Hispanic guy, you know, lowrider, and you know, probably just, you know, an unlikely grouping of people, you know, and very rough-looking Hispanic guy and his, you know, Indian passengers. But this guy, he drives them back into Albuquerque to, you know, find a cousin and get the car.
I would see that baby.
So, yeah, so that's one, and the image that I have in my mind is a Chicano guy cruising, shades on, and Indian guys, you know, in the back seat, just petrified because he's doing like 90. You know? So like one of my favorite themes, like, you know, if I'm able to get there with a piece, is I do like to emphasize the shared history of House Pueblo and our Hispanic neighbors in all of these little, you know, not just house, but all the little villages that are close by. Another one I have is, there's the Capulín, the choke cherry wine. You know, there's good stories related to choke cherry wine, both on our side of the fence and on the Hispanic side. And I have this image in my mind of two guys, one clearly Pueblo, one clearly Hispanic, and they are tanked. They're both on the ground. Just hysterics, because, you know, like, who knows what kind of stories they were telling, what they might have gotten up to. But so that's an image that I have in my mind, is two guys just having a bang up time on choke cherry wine.
That's a great job. Carla, how about you for weaving?
I don't really have a story, but I was thinking how I could answer this question, and I think one of my goals with weaving, perhaps even this year, is to weave a version of a historic blanket known as the Brazil wood, using only the source dyes that would have been used at the time. Today's version of Brazil wood, because of the nature of the dyes, when you are presented with a Brazil wood, it looks a certain way, but over time it's faded. So my story is I want to weave the same blanket or a similar blanket with the dyes that the yarns dyed with the Brazil wood as it would have looked at the time that it was woven, which would be quite different from what you see today. So.
There's a story I heard listening to the radio from NPR in my 20s, and I've always kept it in the back of my head. I'm not sure why I haven't done it yet, but it's on a wrestler based out of Memphis, and I can't even remember his first name, but he landed with the nickname Sputnik, and they called him Sputnik Monroe because he helped with immigration in the South in the 50s. So he was allowing colored people to come in, right? It's just like, no, he's white. It's just white people come to see and spectate. He's like, no, wrestling's for everybody. So he got Black people to start sitting in, what do you call that, in balconies, and then he eventually just trickled out. And it was a really neat way for him to help integration. He eventually passed away, and they call him Sputnik because they thought he was a communist for doing that. Yeah, so I keep having this vision of this guy in a cape, right? Just this nice big bulky guy in his tight little shorts and his boots, and yeah, putting it on a tall pot somehow. I don't know, maybe that's something for But yeah, I just love that story, and that's almost in a strange way. That's that humor taking on a really serious subject. Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, I don't have anything real specific, but, you know, I go back to, I've been doing this now about 30 years, and I go back to when I first started, and, you know, I look back at my old pieces, and I always tell people, you know, they'll ask me how long the piece took me to make, and it's a crazy, you know, question, but it's also the answer, you know, sometimes. But back when I first started, I called everything my oven mitt period. Because I was blue period, I had my oven mitt because all my hands look like oven mitts. So I would learn, you know, from each piece. You know, a teacher of mine in our school, he had told me, you know, don't carve one piece 1,000 times, carve 1,000 pieces. And, or paint 1,000 paintings, whatever, and that's how you learn. So I would start to self-reflect on the work that I was doing. If my hand came out wrong, I would correct that on the next piece, or the eyes were quickly corrected on this one. And so my answer is more, I look forward to the next piece, because what I'm doing now, I could have never done it 30 years ago. Because 30 years ago, I was incapable, my quality of what I could do. So I have a lot of pieces in mind, but my technical ability, I feel, isn't there yet. So those pieces are just waiting for when that time comes.
Jim?
He took my answer. The short answer is it's my next piece. Because I'm always excited about my next piece. And a very specific answer for something that I want to do that I find maybe would be challenging, for instance, for a gallery to take on, is I want to do a life-size jalopy of a Dust Bowl era, I call it the Okie Exodus. Not derogatorily, but the idea of the migration to the west, California. And I want to do it life-size, and I have the fenders from a 1920s truck in the yard waiting to actually be applied to the painting. So when you look at the painting flat, you see this jalopy with the old stuff piled up.
I think you should do that for 2 years from now, you know?
And if you've seen Jim's work,
It'll be about 16 feet long, David. We will make room.
That's
We have
right.
a collector willing to put
Hey, go towards the foundation, they'll love it.
What's that?
and it was, because you did the gypsy card.
Yeah.
I have many things that I like to do, and you've seen some of my imagery on the screen while we've been talking. There's no one piece for me to do. I can imagine hundreds of paintings that I'd love to do. Basically, telling the story of people about 10% in the U.S. That has always been an idea and a subject matter that I wanted to pursue years ago. It wasn't popular, and now I'm in a place in my career where I'm choosing to tell these stories. I still like the natural world. You saw some of my wildlife paintings. I like action. I want to paint as a lot of the wildlife artists did, the European artists did, storytelling with their animal art, like Gary, a lot of the sculptors and the painters.
Well,
There's
you
no-
answered my question, and I'll say I reached mine this last year for America 250. I did a full collection. And my ancestors go back to Martha Washington, so it was always in the back of my head to do something. So. Is there another question?
Any more questions?
I think that would be the lie.
Thank you, I really enjoyed this symposium. My wife and I are desert crawlers, we like going out to the desert and admiring petroglyphs. And standing before them, we're talking about mythology and the emotional catalyst behind our work. I've always, after, we're thunderstruck with these images, I'm always left really wondering what was going through the minds of the people that left those. And now we're, at an intersection with technology, and not to dive into the AI question, but in the next 10 years, there's going to be a singularity where there's going to be emerging with the vast expanse of human knowledge and the ability for artists to convey not their words, but their emotion behind what they've created. I guess my question to you folks as artists, is that something that if it was available, you would think of as a digital gallery card that people could come up to one of your pieces of your creations and instead of reading words, get in touch with your emotions behind the word? Or is that crossing the line?
I'll answer that.
So, I think it's just for future generations, much like us looking at the petroglyphs, is it the mystery that remains that's, you walk away and the question's unanswered, or is it for people to come after us? Is there something more that you can leave beyond like a gallery card is kind of my question. Is there a way to convey that?
I actually think we as practicing artists have a better opportunity that we already are leaving something behind that future people, if there are people, will be able to look at it and still elicit those emotions. If I would have to explain, which I'll gladly do, have a tendency to talk, I will gladly explain enough ad nauseum about my feelings about each piece. But it's more important to me that you look at it and create your own story. And that happened the most profound time in a gallery that I had about 12 years ago. And this woman was crying in front of this particular painting, and I'm like, oh crap, I guess I'll just go see what that's about. And she, when I introduced myself, she hugged me and she said, you painted my family. It was my family, but I let her have it.
I just want to comment, after listening to all of you and as a collector myself, art heals. Our history, from the beginning of time, has been painful. And we will probably continue to go through painful things as the human race. But I do find that art heals. And just as you as artists saying that there are things within cultures, you step into your studio, you create to get those emotions out, to heal. And just your story just now, that collector broke into tears because that art healed. And so that's what I personally love as a collector, is that I think that art is very healing and helps us to get through the difficult periods of life. Thank you.
Last call. Okay, wow. I don't think we could have assembled a better panel today. We were expecting that to be a rewarding conversation, but of course, we had no idea what direction this would take, and that was part of the fun. And we did not share the questions ahead of time with our friends. But wow, that was great. We covered some amazing ground, and I do think we moved the conversation forward. So thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.